Hello and welcome back to the Faith and Culture Show. I'm Catherine Camp, your hostess for this show. As you know, this is where we dig in deeply in order to educate ourselves so that we can begin to have those conversations that count in our culture, conversations with an eternal perspective. Today, I am so excited to have on a veteran American journalist, and he's so much more than that. Mr. David Kupelian. If you've never heard of him, well, you're in for a real treat because he has written some books that will just really make your head spin and maybe do what it did to me way back in 2006, and your eyes will be open to what's going on. So if you're new to the show, I really hope that this is an educational show and gives you some new resources. If you're a veteran coming here to watch this show frequently, you're already awake. So this is going to be fun for you as well. David Kupelian is a veteran American journalist. He's vice president and managing editor of an online news pioneer network. It's called WorldNet Daily, otherwise WND.com. He's the editor of Whistleblower magazine and a widely read columnist. He is the author of 3 influential books: The Marketing of Evil, How I Was Introduced to Him, and its sequel, How Evil Works, and The Snapping of the American Mind, Healing a Nation Broken by a Lawless Government and Godless Culture. He has been featured on Fox News, MSNBC, C-SPAN, and CBN, and interviewed by Sean Hannity, Tucker Carlson, Laura Ingraham, and many other TV and radio hosts. So without further ado, I would like to bring him on right away. Welcome to the Faith and Culture Show, David. So good to be here with you.
Thank you, Catherine. Very nice to be here with you.
Well, you were like one of the big influencers for me way back in 2006 with your Marketing of Evil. I brought the first book that I bought here, and I bought, actually, after reading it, it was a godsend. I found you through D. James Kennedy. He was doing one of his Sunday sermons, and it was based completely on your book. And how important it was to pay attention to what was going on in the world, because we were headed for trouble. And I really miss him because he lets us, he was one of the first ones to start opening people's eyes. But when I read this, I bought 4 more copies and I started distributing them to individuals in positions of power because I felt they were not following along God's guidelines, and instead they were falling for everything that they were hearing on the media. So thank you for your work. It is a big deal. So would you like to tell us a little bit more about yourself and how you came to write the books that you have?
Thank you, Catherine. So journalists, they're interested in the who, what, when, where, how, and why of what's going on in the world. I've been a journalist I'm 75 years old. I've been a journalist since for more than 40 years. And of all those questions, who, what, when, where, I've always been most interested in the why question. The why is the deepest question, and it's the one, if you're ever going to solve any of these problems, you have to understand the why. And so that's been just been drawn to that for decades. And so when I had the idea to write The Marketing of Evil, and this was, almost 20 years ago, the world had changed so much since I was a kid. I grew up in suburban Washington, D.C. My father was a rocket scientist. I rode my bike to school every day, and there was no thought of danger or crime. There was not only no crime, there was not even any thought about crime. It was a completely different country world then. This was basically a pretty unified, the great, center-right American middle class was pretty happy. It was Judeo-Christian, it was unified. And I look at this like in the early 2000s and say, what has happened to my country? And so I started doing some research, and I ended up with this book. And, it's kind of the history of how abortion became legalized. Abortion was illegal, way back decades and centuries ago. It was like, oh, no, you're like killing little babies in the womb. No, it's not okay. So that's illegal. How did that suddenly become legal? And so I interviewed Bernard Nathanson, who, was one of the founders of the pro-abortion movement. He had this is proof God exists and that God can help anyone. He had a tremendous change. He, even as a self-described Jewish atheist, he came to believe that what am I doing? These are human beings. They had amniocentesis and these new technologies, ultrasound, and he's looking at this and he's saying, he had a soul. He had an intact soul in there. He said, what am I doing? So long story short, I interviewed him in 1991, and about 4 or 5 years later, he converted to Roman Catholicism, was baptized by John Cardinal O'Connor at St. Patrick's Cathedral in New York City, and he became the most eloquent and powerful pro-life voice for the rest of his natural life. But wow. In that chapter, I go and he explained to me that, see, and this is the bottom line of all the marketing of evil, of different forms of evil. You can't market evil without lying, okay? And so he said there were about 200 to 250 women who were dying back in the 1960s from illegal botched abortions. But we made up a number of 10,000, and that's what we fed to the media and so forth. And on down the line, he was very honest about the straight up lying marketing that they did. And it's continued ever since. How many teenage girls go into Planned Parenthood? It's just a blob of tissue. It's like a tumor, like a cancer. Just get rid of it. So, and they don't want you to see, oh, wait a minute. This is a little baby with fingers and toes and a beating heart. And so with all the major areas of how America has like disintegrated, such abortion is one, the whole gay rights agenda, as it used to be called, now it's LGBTQ, XYZ, and so forth, all the different areas of corruption of our country, education, public education, it was taken over by the progressives, meaning the Marxists, more than 100 years ago. In the aftermath of the Civil War in the 1880s, these people, basically atheistic people, got together and said, we have a brilliant vision of what should be, and it has nothing to do with God and his commandments. So, Catherine, most people don't know this stuff, and it's very important to know that. So I have, I think, originally 10 chapters. I have the more recent version here in paperback. It's got a few extra chapters, but I've always had the apple on the cover. Okay, the allusion to the Garden of Eden. Okay,
right.
And the reason is because that was the original marketing of evil. Things were going along great in Eden. All its citizens. There were 2 of them. They were doing great. They had everything they wanted, and along comes somebody who pretended to be their friend, right?
Right.
So did God say the blah, 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 blah? Said, no, you won't die. God's just testing you. He's seeing if you've got what it takes, or God's holding out on you. He doesn't want you to have everything. He's testing you to see if you've really got the guts to be a God like you really should be, And so Adam and Eve fell for it, and we've been falling for it ever since. But the reason I'm mentioning that is that Satan lied. You can't market evil without lying. It's not just being very clever and packaging and perfuming your, whatever you're trying to sell and tell people how it's really good. You have to lie. And so that's, today, if we look at what's happening today, it's like a lot of Christians think we must be in the end times now. Okay, I don't really know. I'm not an expert in that. Could be. I know the end of the story. I've read the last 2 chapters of Revelation. It has a nice ending. I like that. I know things have to get really bad. Things have been really bad before in history. We don't, and the Bible says we're not going to really know. It says, but we're supposed to be watchful, okay, and to be faithful, so forth. So I'm not an expert in that, but things are really bad right now.
Hey, thanks for watching the Faith and Culture Show. If you'd like to continue this particular episode, please go to the Rumble link below or click on the QR code and join me on the free speech platform over there. Look for the name of the episode and start about the 10-minute mark. I hope to see you there because it's a good one.